Hello and welcome to the Morning Scoop. This is Joe Draime, your host. It is Sunday, August 21st. It is officially move-out day for the Buckeyes as they finish fall camp. They wrapped up their second scrimmage yesterday, which we'll have more info on in the coming days. But we are officially we have one more Saturday without Ohio State football. I can't be any more excited. We even got some week 0 games coming up next week that I'm going to be tuning into. But we're getting closer and closer to that matchup against Notre Dame. So, in the spirit of preseason, the kind of the fun of preseason, we're going to talk about the Big Ten as a whole. We're going to break down the standings, how I think it's going to shake out, and we're going to we're going to learn a little bit more about these other teams. So we're going to start with the Big Ten East. Obviously, we all know who the favorite is. This shouldn't be news to anybody, but Ohio State's the obvious favorite. Vegas has the over-under set at 11 wins. That's pretty absurd, but I would even personally take the over, even though there are a few trap games that could be on the schedule. But I expect them to really run the table this year, especially if that new defense and the new staff really comes through like we think they can. And with the exception of probably Alabama, they return the most star-studded talent really of anybody, and it really seems like those two teams are on a collision course for the college football playoff. Now going into the second spot in the East, I have Michigan here. Their offense, or their offseason rather, was not very inspiring, and I really don't have much faith that Harbaugh can really build on consistency moving forward with last season. Vegas has their line sit at 9.5, and I think I'd probably say they go 9-3. So I'm going to take the under there. They obviously have a quarterback battle on their hands still, neither of which particularly wow me between McNamara and JJ McCarthy. But the run game should still be pretty decent. The O line should be okay. The running backs are going to be pretty good again. They get Michigan State and Penn State at home, so that should make their schedule really a bit more manageable. But the big loss for the staff was they did lose Mike McDonald, the DC, to the Ravens, who he's someone I really like and would look out for to be a head coach in the NFL in a few years. And they lost their three best players with Ajabo, Dax Hill, and Aiden Hutchinson on defense, so they'll be younger as a collective group than they were last year. And the fact that they were such a senior-laden team last year was really, in my opinion, the difference maker in them winning the Big Ten. Still, I have them coming in second in the East, but the gap between the top team and the rest of the conference is pretty vast this year, I would say. Now coming in third, Penn State is the third team for me. I think this will be a typical 8-4 type of year for the program that we're used to seeing out of James Franklin and his not elite football program. Vegas has the over/under set at 8.5, and we know what they think. I think that's the under is probably the play there. I think Sean Clifford is as average of a Big Ten quarterback as you could possibly have, but I think their offensive line will be a little bit better. They weren't very good last year, but I think Nick Singleton, their freshman running back, he's somebody that I really like. I think he could come in and be an impact guy right away. But they also lost Jahan Dotson, who is the first-round pick at receiver, and I don't think they have anyone really as good in that room to really take over and secure that volume that Dotson was getting in the passing game. Their defense could actually be pretty good, and I'd expect them to keep Penn State in most of its games. I don't think they're going to get blown out a whole bunch or anything. But they do have some big road games at Purdue where weird things always happen, and at Auburn and Jordan-Hare, which is another place where a lot of weird things happen. And they have to go to Michigan, so that's going to be a pretty big challenge for them from a scheduling standpoint. They do get to host Ohio State, but even that, they don't really have as big of an advantage there as they would normally have, because it's not a whiteout. It's a noon kickoff, and I speak from experience when I say Happy Valley for a noon kickoff is not the same Happy Valley as there is for a whiteout. So I really have Penn State coming in at third in the East. I think they'll be okay, but they've got some holes. Michigan State, moving on, is my pick for fourth. I really like Mel Tucker a lot, and I think he's done a great job so far, in fact. But I just don't see how they're going to be able to do what they did last year. Vegas has the over-under set at 7.5. And I think 7-5 really sounds about right for them. Maybe 8-4. Kenneth Walker III was virtually the entire offense last season, and Peyton Thorne to me just doesn't seem like the guy who could really shoulder a load like that. And I don't think the offensive line is going to be much better. Last year they were terrible in pass protection. I don't think that's really going to change. That's really going to hurt them against teams like Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. We're going to get after the quarterback a little bit more. They do get Ohio State and Wisconsin at home, which is nice for them, but they do have to go on the road to Michigan and at Penn State. For their defense, they have to get better defending the pass if they want to really do anything important. And they brought in some SEC transfers to try and work that out, but we have to see how that pans out first. As right now, I have them in fourth. In the fifth spot, I think it probably has to be Maryland. I actually really think they have some good talent on offense. I really like their wide receiver room quite a bit. And I think Tagovailoa is a decent to above average quarterback in terms of the Big Ten. Their offensive line, though, is just not great, and I don't think they're going to try to beat you running the football anyway. But I'm not sold on Mike Locksley as a head coach at all, and I think their defense really leaves a lot to be desired. I think they go about 6-6 probably, and Vegas has the over/under at 6, so we're thinking on pretty similar terms there. Moving on, coming in at 6, I think it'll be Rutgers. The Fighting Greg Schianos are still trying to break into the middle tier of the Big Ten. I don't think it's going to be quite this year, though. I think the defense has improved, and Schiano's always going to have guys playing hard, especially on defense. And in terms of building a program, I think Schiano is the ideal guy to kind of do that at Rutgers, but they're still quite a ways away, and I don't foresee that changing right now. The offense still just won't be very good, and I think that's going to allow them to. I don't think that's going to allow them to have much consistency. Their defense might help keep them in a few games, though. They also may eke out an upset here or there. Vegas has their over/under at 4 wins. I think about 4-8 or 3-9 sounds pretty reasonable in my opinion. And coming in last, we obviously have Indiana. To put it simply, they were terrible last year. I think they're going to be terrible again this year. Vegas has the over/under set at 4.5. I'm taking the under on that. I think they're probably going to do what they did last year and go 2-10. Both sides of the line are abysmal, and I think Tom Allen is a below-average head coach. I don't think he has what it takes to get these guys out of the basement this year. So, the Big Ten East is now settled. Let's go to the Big Ten West. I have Wisconsin winning the West. Over the past 10 years, with the exception of Ohio State, they've probably really been the most consistent program out there. I think Paul Chryst does a really good job, and I think he has built that program up to the point where they can compete with the big boys from time to time. And they're generally speaking, a pretty formidable challenge because they are so well coached. Jim Leonard is a really good defensive coordinator, and I expect him to have this unit ready, even if he does have to replace a few starters. Braylon Allen is one of the better running backs in the Big Ten. I like him a lot. And the Wisconsin run game, just as we know, it's always solid, especially under Chryst. Problem is, Graham Mertz is still a total question mark to me. I think he probably could get a little bit better this year, but sometimes he's just a turnover machine. But we saw him improve a little bit last year, but you're just wondering what version of him you're going to get. I think he'll be a little bit better this year, so I think they're going to probably have the best shot out of anybody in the West, which really is not very good in terms of a division this year. Vegas has their line set at 8.5. I think 9-3 sounds about right for me, especially So I think the Badgers are probably going to return to Ohio State or return to Indy to play Ohio State. Sorry about that. So moving on into the second spot in the Big Ten West. Let's do something a little bit different here. Let's go with Nebraska. I know that they were 3-9 last year, but that was probably the best 3-9 football team I think I've ever seen. They were probably 4 or 5 plays away from winning 7 games, in all honesty. They took Ohio State down to the wire in Lincoln and played plenty of other teams really closely, mainly due to the defense, which I think will be pretty good again, really. Also, they'll finally be getting a new starter at quarterback with Casey Thompson transferring from Texas, so the 50-year reign of Adrian Martinez has officially come to an end in Lincoln. Vegas has their line set at 7.5, and I'm going to go off the beaten path here and say they go 8-4. Let's have a little bit of fun, and let's let Scott Frost have his little moment in the sun where he gets finally a bowl berth. Coming in third, I have Purdue coming in at the 3 spot. I really like Aiden O'Connell, honestly. He gets the ball out quick. He is pretty decisive about what he wants to do. I think he's probably the second best quarterback in the conference behind Stroud, if you ask me. But losing David Bell and Carl Laftis from the team could be pretty big. That defense will almost certainly take a step back. And I think they'll still be a mid-tier Big Ten team. I don't think they'll be as good as they were last year, at least not as dangerous. Their line is set at 7.5. I think 7-5 sounds pretty reasonable, so I have them coming in at third. I have Iowa coming in at fourth. I really like Kirk Ferentz. I think he's a really good football coach. They're going to do what Iowa has always done. Play within themselves, try not to make too many mistakes, while also not taking way too many chances either. I think the defense will be pretty solid overall. I think both sides of the line should be pretty solid. Vegas also has their line at 7.5. I think 7.5 is probably, again, pretty reasonable for this team. For Minnesota, or at 5, I have Minnesota. Tanner Morgan is coming back. I like him as a Big Ten quarterback. He's okay. He's probably, in my opinion, the third best guy in the conference, but Morgan is coming back. That means PJ Fleck is also coming back, and I'm no real big fan of PJ Fleck. I think he's a used car salesman. I think the roster is probably capable of the roster is really probably capable of more than 5th place, but I just don't see it from this staff. I think they'll underachieve, and I think that really starts at the top. Vegas says they're over/under set 7.5. I say it's really probably either 6-6 or 5-7. Now, coming in at 6th, I'm going with Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald is a really good football coach when it comes to developing and teaching guys toughness and getting guys to play smart. And their defense, it was terrible last year, but I think they could improve with a little bit of coaching this year. Again, the talent's not great, but you can get them well coached. Simply put, when it comes to the offense, I think it's going to be terrible. It was terrible last year. I think the quarterback play they're going to have is going to be dreadful. They could always be a tough out, though, for a trap game, and they do have Ohio State and Evanston, so that could always be a little bit tricky depending on the circumstances. But at the end of the day, Vegas says their line at 3.5, and I think 3-9 is probably how they're more than likely to finish. And coming in last in the Big Ten West, I have Illinois. Brett Bielema is back again. I love Bert. He's so much fun. They have some talent actually returning on defense, but I just don't see it from this offense. I don't see it from this group, and I don't see it from this coach. I think they're going to have a struggle of a season and ultimately lose their last game in Evanston to finish 3-9 and secure their last place in the Big Ten West. Their line is also set at 4.5, and obviously I think they're coming in at the under. So, there we have it for the Big Ten. I think it ultimately comes down to Ohio State and Wisconsin and Indy, which that's always a good time. So, anywho, we'll have more information on the scrimmage from yesterday coming in the following days. We would like to say thank you very much for listening, and be sure to tune in tomorrow. Thank you so much.